You ever meet someone who just seems like the universe's way of making up for all the garbage you've been through? That's what I thought Callum was. I'm Madison, 35, with two amazing boys, and let me tell you, dating as a single mom is basically like having a second full-time job that pays you in disappointment. When I met Callum, 9 months ago, I wasn't even looking. He came into the insurance office where I worked to file a claim, and I swear, the way he pulled up in that Audi, I knew he was different. After 3 years of barely making ends meet since Derek left me for his gym trainer Skylar, I deserved someone who could actually afford to take me nice places. From our very first date at this cute wine bar downtown, Callum insisted on paying. Like, actually insisted. Wouldn't even let me reach for my purse. And honestly, after stretching every dollar for my boys, it felt amazing to just sit back and be taken care of for once. I stopped offering to pay after the third date. Why would I? He makes triple what I do, and he doesn't have two growing boys who need new shoes every 3 months. The pattern just naturally developed. He paid for dinners, movies, drinks, everything. Between us, I started suggesting nicer places as time went on. Places I'd only dreamed of going when I was with Derek, and Callum never batted an eye at the prices. He'd just hand over his credit card while telling me to get dessert too. Meanwhile, my ex Derek was suddenly doing better than ever. 3 years of paying the minimum child support, and suddenly he's buying a house with little Miss Pilates perfect. My boys would come home from weekends with them talking about their new backyard and how Skylar makes homemade pizzas. Like, great for you, Derek. You found someone who bakes and does splits. What about the years I spent supporting you through your finding myself phase? Callum became my win, my proof that I was doing fine too. When he surprised me with designer perfume for my birthday, I made sure to wear it during school pickup, where I knew I'd run into Skylar. The way things were going with Callum, I figured it was time he met the boys and Derek. A Christmas dinner seemed perfect. Neutral territory, everyone on their best behavior. When the fancy restaurant Callum took me to for our 9-month anniversary came up in conversation, I just knew he was ready for more commitment. I mean, you don't spend that kind of money on someone unless you're serious, right? As I watched him order another bottle of wine that cost more than my electric bill, I thought about how perfect Christmas would be with someone who could finally give me the holiday I deserved. Someone who understood that taking care of me meant taking care of my whole situation. Someone who wouldn't make me split the bill like we're just buddies grabbing lunch. The night Callum suggested we try that fancy steakhouse I'd been hinting about for weeks, I spent 3 hours getting ready. My girlfriend Tiffany watched the boys so I could actually take a bath without someone barging in asking where their charger was. I wore that black dress I'd been saving, the one with the price tag still on it that I bought on clearance 6 months ago. When Callum picked me up, he whistled and said I looked expensive. Little did he know I'd been planning this night for weeks. See, Christmas was coming up, and I needed to lock down our holiday plans. Living paycheck to paycheck means I have to be strategic about these things. The boys had been asking if we were doing anything special this year, and I wanted to finally give them a Christmas that didn't involve me stress crying in the bathroom after checking my bank account. Callum had met my boys a few times by now, always bringing them those imported chocolate bars they love that I could never justify buying. He was trying, I'll give him that. But there's a difference between dating a woman and dating a mother, and it was time he understood that package deal meant holidays too. The restaurant was everything I'd imagined. Dim lighting, actual cloth napkins, waiters who didn't look like they hated their lives. When Callum ordered a bottle of wine without even glancing at the price, I felt that familiar flutter. This was the life I was supposed to have. Not the one where I debate between paying for the boys' sports equipment or getting my car fixed. The conversation flowed easily as always. I waited until our main courses arrived before bringing up Christmas. So I've been thinking about the holiday, I said, cutting into my steak that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. The boys really like you, and I think it would be nice if you joined us for Christmas dinner. He smiled, and I could tell he was genuinely touched to be included. I'd love that, he said, reaching for my hand across the table. Just us and the boys? This was the tricky part. I took a large sip of wine before answering. Well, Derek and I have this arrangement where we do holidays together for the boys. So it would be us, the boys, Derek, and Skylar. I watched his expression carefully, but he just nodded, still smiling. That's really mature of you all. Where were you thinking of having it? I explained about the restaurant Derek and I had agreed on. Not quite as nice as where we were sitting, but still a place that required a reservation and had tablecloths. It's $75 per adult and $25 for kids, I added, watching him closely. He nodded, seeming fine with the price. Sounds reasonable for a holiday meal, he said. I hesitated, then decided to just go for it. So I was thinking, since you have, more disposable income, and Derek just bought that house with Skylar, maybe you could cover the dinner? I laughed lightly, like it was half a joke, even though it absolutely wasn't. The shift in his expression was subtle but immediate. His smile tightened. Cover it? For everyone? Including Derek and his girlfriend? The way he said it made it sound ridiculous, which irritated me. Well, yeah, I said, trying to keep my tone light. It would be a really nice gesture, and honestly, Derek's been stretching himself thin with the new house. It would mean a lot to the boys to have a nice holiday without tension. Callum set down his fork. Madison, I'm happy to pay for you and the boys. But I'm not comfortable paying for your ex-husband and his partner. That seems inappropriate. I could feel heat rising in my face. Inappropriate? What was inappropriate was Derek leaving me for his trainer and making me become a single mom overnight. What was inappropriate was how I had to downsize our apartment 3 times in the past 3 years, while he got to start fresh. It's just a meal, I said, my voice getting that edge that Tiffany says makes me sound like I'm about to go off. It's not like I'm asking you to pay their mortgage. Callum put down his wine glass a little too firmly. I understand it's important to you, but I think you're being unreasonable. Why would I pay for another man's meal? Especially your ex-husband. The way he emphasized ex-husband made it sound dirty somehow. I glanced around, hoping nobody at nearby tables was listening. Because you're the one with money, I said, lowering my voice. Derek's house poor now, and I can barely keep up with the boys' expenses. You're literally sitting here drinking a bottle of wine that costs more than I make in 3 hours. Callum's jaw tightened. I could tell I'd struck a nerve, but honestly, he needed to hear it. Men, like Callum, don't understand what it's like to count coins for laundry, or tell your kids they can't go on the school trip because the registration fee would mean no electricity that month. Your financial situation isn't Derek's responsibility anymore, and it's certainly not mine, he said, all calm and rational, like he was explaining something to a child. I'm happy to build a relationship with you and support our experiences together, but I'm not going to financially support your ex-husband's Christmas dinner. The word support hung in the air between us. Wasn't that exactly what he'd been doing these past 9 months? Supporting me? Paying for everything? What was different now? You know what, I said, pushing my plate away, even though I'd been dreaming about this steak for weeks. If that's how you feel about it, maybe you shouldn't come to Christmas dinner at all. I hadn't planned to say that. The words just tumbled out, propelled by disappointment and frustration. And maybe a little by the fact that I'd already told the boys Callum would probably give them those fancy Swiss chocolate bars for Christmas. Callum stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Are you serious right now? You're uninviting me because I won't pay for your ex and his girlfriend? When he said it like that, it sounded bad, but he was missing the point entirely. I'm uninviting you because you clearly don't understand what it means to be with someone like me, I said, my voice getting wobbly despite my best efforts. I have responsibilities you couldn't possibly understand. I thought you were different from other guys. I could feel tears welling up, the genuine kind that come from a lifetime of disappointment. I need to go to the bathroom, I announced, grabbing my purse and standing up. I needed a minute to regroup, to figure out how to salvage this night and this relationship that I'd invested 9 months in. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection under the unflattering lighting. This was not how tonight was supposed to go. Tiffany had been right when she warned me not to bring up the Christmas dinner payment tonight. Men need to be eased into these things, she'd said while helping me zip up my dress. Plant the seed and then water it slowly. But I was tired of waiting. Tired of strategizing how to get basic needs met. I splashed some water on my face, careful not to ruin my makeup, and took a few deep breaths. When I returned to the table, I expected Callum to have cooled off. Maybe even realized he was being ridiculous. Instead, he was sitting there with this cold look I'd never seen before. The dessert menus that had been on the table were gone. "I've paid for dinner," he said flatly when I sat down. "Except the tip. You can cover that." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Excuse me. You heard me," he said, and I swear his voice had changed, like he was a completely different person. "I'm not an ATM, Madison. This relationship is over." My mouth literally fell open. Was he breaking up with me? Over this? "You can't be serious," I stammered. "We're having an argument. Couples argue." He actually laughed at that, but not in a nice way. "This isn't an argument. This is a revelation. You've never once offered to pay for anything in 9 months. Not a coffee, not a movie ticket, nothing. And now you want me to pay for your ex-husband's Christmas dinner? I've been blind, but I'm seeing clearly now." I felt my face heating up as other diners started glancing our way. "Lower your voice," I hissed. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene?" He shook his head in disbelief. "You just tried to extort me into paying for your ex's dinner, then disinvited me from Christmas when I refused." "But sure, I'm the problem." "Extort?" I repeated, my voice rising despite myself. "Is that what you think this is? I'm a single mother trying to create a nice holiday for my children." The couple at the next table was openly staring now. I didn't care anymore. How dare he make me out to be some kind of gold digger when all I wanted was some basic financial consideration? "No," Callum said, his voice now deadly calm. "You're a grown woman who's been using me as a personal bank account and now wants to extend that service to include your ex-husband. It stops now." He stood up, dropping his napkin on the table. "The bill's paid except for the tip. Consider this your first independent financial decision in our relationship. Also your last." My mouth opened and closed, but nothing came out. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not like this. "You can't just walk out," I managed finally. "We need to talk about this like adults." "There's nothing to talk about," he said, putting on his jacket. "You've shown me exactly who you are tonight, and I want no part of it. Call your ex-husband for a ride home." He actually had the nerve to smile sarcastically at me. "Maybe he'll even pay for it." Before I could respond, he was walking away. I sat there, stunned, as he stopped to apologize to the hostess for the disruption before walking out the door. The waiter appeared almost immediately, placing the bill folder on the table with an uncomfortable smile. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" I opened the folder with shaking hands. Callum had paid for the meal, $207.86. The tip line was empty. I would need to leave at least $40 to not look like a complete jerk. That was almost half of what I had in my checking account until payday. Tears welled up as the full reality of the situation hit me. I was stranded at an expensive restaurant with barely enough money for an Uber home. My boyfriend of 9 months had just dumped me in public, and Christmas was now going to be just like every other year, me stretching dollars and pretending everything was fine for the boys' sake. I called Tiffany from the restaurant bathroom, sobbing so hard she could barely understand me. "He just left me here," I choked out. "Over nothing. Over a stupid Christmas dinner." "Wait, what?" Tiffany sounded confused. "Start from the beginning. What happened?" I explained everything through hiccuping sobs, how unreasonable Callum had been, how he'd embarrassed me in front of the entire restaurant, how he'd called me a gold digger, essentially. "And now I'm stuck here with a huge tip to pay and barely enough money for an Uber home," I finished, blowing my nose on the fancy bathroom hand towel. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Mad," Tiffany finally said, using my nickname that only my closest friends used. "I love you, but did you really ask him to pay for Derek and Skylar's dinner? After he's been paying for everything for 9 months? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Whose side are you on?" I snapped. "You know my situation. You know what Derek's put me through. Callum has money, real money. It wouldn't have hurt him to do this one thing." Tiffany sighed. "I'm coming to get you, but we need to talk about this when you're calmer." This doesn't sound like it was about the money. I hung up, fuming. Not about the money? What else would it be about? I stared at my reflection in the mirror, mascara running down my cheeks. This was supposed to be a special night. The night where Callum finally understood what being with me, truly being with me, meant. Instead, I was alone, humiliated, and facing the prospect of telling my boys that once again, Christmas was going to be a scaled-back affair. I spent the entire weekend ignoring Callum's texts. He had the nerve to message me the next morning saying he hoped I got home safely, and that he was sorry things ended that way. As if this was some mutual decision we'd come to together. I didn't dignify it with a response. By Sunday night, I'd transformed from devastated to furious. Who did he think he was, treating me like this after 9 months? I'd introduced him to my children. I'd made space for him in my complicated life. And he threw it all away because he didn't want to pay for one dinner? It didn't make sense. When I picked up the boys from Derek's Sunday evening, Skylar was there. All fake smiles and perfect yoga pants. The boys had such a great weekend, she chirped, like she was their mother and not the homewrecker who destroyed our family. We took them to that new trampoline park. Of course they did, because Derek and his fitness Barbie could afford extras like that while I was counting coins for laundry detergent. That's nice, I managed through gritted teeth. Grab your backpacks, boys. We need to get home for school tomorrow. As the boys went to collect their things, Derek hung back, awkwardly shifting his weight. So about Christmas dinner, he started. Skylar and I were thinking. Actually, I cut him off. There's been a change of plans. Callum and I broke up. I tried to say it casually, like it was no big deal, but my voice betrayed me with a slight crack. Derek looked genuinely surprised. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What happened? What happened? What happened was that men like Derek and Callum get to walk through life making messes and leaving women like me to clean them up. What happened was that once again, I'd been left holding the bag. It doesn't matter, I said shortly, but I can't afford that restaurant now. We'll have to figure something else out. The look of pity that crossed Derek's face made me want to scream. We can cover it, he offered, glancing back at Skylar, who nodded encouragingly. It's important for the boys. And just like that, my humiliation was complete. My ex-husband and the woman he left me for were now going to pay for my Christmas dinner. I wanted to refuse out of pride, but what choice did I have? The boys had been looking forward to this dinner for weeks. Fine, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. Thanks. The drive home was quiet, the boys tired from their weekend of trampolines and whatever other expensive activities Derek had planned. I kept replaying the restaurant scene in my mind, wondering if I could have handled it differently. Maybe if I'd brought it up more casually? Maybe if I'd suggested he pay for just the boys' meals and Derek's, but not Skylar's? No. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that Callum was the one in the wrong. 9 months of dinners and trips and gifts, and he balked at one holiday meal? It didn't add up, unless... A cold thought crept into my mind. Unless he'd been looking for an excuse to end things. Men did that, didn't they? Used one fight as justification to leave when they'd been planning it all along? By Monday morning, I'd convinced myself that was exactly what had happened. Callum had used this Christmas dinner situation to make me look like the bad guy when he'd probably been seeing someone else behind my back for weeks. It was the only explanation that made sense. When Tiffany called to check on me, I told her my theory. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Mad, she finally said. Do you really believe that? Or are you just trying to make yourself feel better? What is that supposed to mean? I demanded. You don't think it's suspicious that he freaked out over one dinner after spending way more than that on me over 9 months? Tiffany sighed. I think maybe it wasn't about the money at all. Maybe it was about the principle, about feeling used. Used? I nearly shouted. How was he used? He offered to pay for things. I never once forced him. But did you ever offer? Even once? The question hung in the air between us. Had I? I tried to remember a single time I'd reached for my wallet, insisted on paying for coffee, covered a movie ticket. Nothing came to mind. But that didn't mean anything, right? He knew my situation. He knew I was struggling. A week passed with no more messages from Callum. I'd blocked him on social media, but part of me kept expecting a grand apology gesture. Flowers at work, maybe, or a heartfelt card explaining that he'd overreacted. Nothing came. Christmas was now 2 weeks away, and I found myself dreading the holiday I'd once been so excited about. The boys kept asking if Callum would still be giving them those chocolate bars. I didn't have the heart to tell them no. When you're a single mom, you get used to sugarcoating reality for your kids. Derek called midweek to finalize the Christmas dinner plans. "We booked the reservation for 4, he said. "I figured you wouldn't want to bring a date now." The way he trailed off made my skin crawl. Like he was waiting for me to break down and confess how heartbroken I was. "4 is fine," I said stiffly. "The boys are excited." There was an awkward pause. "Madison," Derek finally said, "are you okay? This breakup seems to have hit you hard." I almost laughed. Derek, who'd walked out on our 10-year marriage with barely a backward glance, was now concerned about my emotional well-being after a 9-month relationship ended. "I'm fine," I said. "It's just been a lot with the holidays and everything." "I get it," he said, though he clearly didn't. "Listen, if you need anything..." "We're fine," I repeated more firmly. "See you at Christmas." I hung up before he could say anything else sympathetic. I didn't need his pity. What I needed was for men to stop disappointing me. At work the next day, I made the mistake of checking Facebook during my lunch break. Right at the top of my feed was a photo of Callum at some office holiday party, with his arm around a blonde woman I'd never seen before. The post was from a mutual friend, who apparently hadn't gotten the memo about our breakup. The caption read, "Great seeing these two lovebirds tonight, shashed holiday magic." I nearly dropped my phone. 2 lovebirds? It hadn't even been 2 weeks. So I was right, he had been seeing someone else. The betrayal burned like acid in my throat. I immediately texted Tiffany the screenshot with no caption. She called me seconds later. "Don't jump to conclusions," she said by way of greeting. "That could be anyone, a coworker, a cousin." "A cousin he has his arm around at a holiday party that's tagged lovebirds?" I hissed, aware of my coworkers nearby. "He's moved on already, Tiff. I was right." Tiffany was quiet for a moment. "Okay, maybe you're right. But does it matter? You guys broke up. He's allowed to see other people." "It's been less than 2 weeks. "Mad," Tiffany said softly. "I love you, but maybe it's time for some real talk. This pattern keeps happening to you. Derek, then Jason before him, now Callum. Different men, same story. You feeling used and abandoned. At some point, we have to look at the common denominator." I felt like she'd slapped me. "Are you saying this is my fault? That I deserve to be dumped in a fancy restaurant and left to find my own way home?" "Of course not," Tiffany backpedaled. "I'm just saying, maybe there's something to learn here. About expectations, about communication." I hung up on her. Some friend she was. The night before Christmas dinner, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I would have to sit across from Derek and Skylar, accepting their charity, pretending everything was fine for the boys' sake. And Callum would be who knows where with his blonde lovebird, probably buying her expensive gifts and taking her to fancy restaurants. The unfairness of it all made my chest physically hurt. I'd given 9 months to a relationship that ended over one request. One reasonable request, in my opinion. I'd opened up my life, my family, my heart, and for what? To be back exactly where I started, but now with the added humiliation of a public breakup and the knowledge that he'd moved on instantly. The truth was, I didn't feel like I'd done anything wrong. Yes, maybe I should have offered to pay for things occasionally. Maybe asking him to cover Derek and Skylar's dinner was pushing a boundary. But wasn't a relationship supposed to be about supporting each other? Wasn't my emotional labor, coordinating schedules, remembering birthdays, planning dates, worth something too? Why was his financial contribution counted while mine wasn't? As Christmas morning dawned, I put on a brave face for the boys. We opened the modest gifts I'd managed to get them, saved from the budget I'd originally planned to spend on Callum's present. They were disappointed not to get their special chocolate bars, but I promised to find them somewhere after the holidays. At the restaurant that night, watching Derek and Skylar holding hands across the table, looking around at all the happy families enjoying their perfect Christmas dinners, I couldn't help but wonder where I'd gone wrong. Not just with Callum, but with my life in general. How had I ended up here, accepting charity from my ex while the man I thought might be the one had moved on without a backward glance? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I didn't deserve this. I deserved someone who understood my worth, who valued all I had to offer beyond just my ability to pay for meals, someone who wouldn't abandon me over one disagreement. Maybe Callum wasn't that person. Maybe he'd shown his true colors at that restaurant, or maybe I had shown mine. Either way, as I watched my boys laugh at something Skylar said, I made a silent promise to myself. Next Christmas would be different. Next Christmas, I wouldn't be dependent on anyone else for my happiness or my financial security. Next Christmas would be on my terms, whatever those turned out to be.